That is a ridiculous question, and I
Yes or no?
No.
I will.
Sorry, Mr.
I will
Chairman,
take
but
that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Right out of the gate, you can already see exactly where this is headed. This is not a serious inquiry. This is not an honest search for answers. This is a carefully staged political ambush designed for headlines, social media clips, and partisan outrage. We are watching a long-time American diplomat, a man who served this country for decades under multiple administrations, being publicly targeted by a congresswoman who appears far more interested in viral moments than responsible leadership. This is exactly what has poisoned modern political discourse. It is no longer about facts, truth, or solving problems. It is about humiliation, intimidation, and performance politics. The goal is not understanding. The goal is destruction. What you are about to watch is a perfect example of how serious congressional hearings have turned into political theater. Instead of meaningful discussion, we get scripted outrage. Instead of respectful debate, we get personal attacks. Instead of thoughtful governance, we get grandstanding for cameras and internet applause. We are going to break down this entire exchange and expose exactly why this kind of reckless behavior is not only unprofessional but deeply damaging to the country and its institutions. If you are tired of politicians turning every hearing into a circus, if you are exhausted by the endless political games and manufactured outrage, then hit that like button and make sure you are subscribed for more honest analysis and common sense commentary.
Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question. That was not a question. I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S.-trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interests, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question, because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
All right, now that you have seen the entire exchange, it is even worse than it looked at the beginning. Let's be absolutely honest about what just happened. That was not a hearing, that was a political show trial. It was a calculated attempt to publicly shame and discredit someone rather than engage in a serious conversation about foreign policy. Let's start with Elliot Abrams. Here is a man with decades of foreign policy experience, serving the United States at the highest levels through some of the most complicated geopolitical crises in modern history. Has he been involved in controversial moments? Absolutely. That comes with 40 years in international diplomacy and national security. But what Ilhan Omar tried to do here was not about accountability, it was about character assassination. She immediately brought up his past legal issues, not to add context, not to understand policy, but to poison the atmosphere from the very first second. She wanted viewers to stop listening before he could even speak. That is the tactic: attack the individual, destroy credibility, and avoid debating actual ideas. It is classic political theater, and pay attention to the pattern. Every single time Elliot Abrams tried to explain context, answer a question, or provide nuance, she interrupted him. That was not a question. I reserve my time. She did not want answers. She wanted clips. She wanted confrontation. She wanted a monologue disguised as oversight. Then came the loaded yes or no questions, asking someone to summarize decades of complicated geopolitical conflict with a single word. That is not a search for truth. That is a trap designed to force a damaging soundbite. Asking whether a massacre was a fabulous achievement is not a serious question. It is a deliberately inflammatory accusation meant to paint someone as morally monstrous, no matter how they respond. Elliot Abrams was absolutely correct to reject the premise of the question. He explained that the real achievement was the survival and establishment of democracy in El Salvador, a reality that Ilhan Omar conveniently ignored because it did not fit the narrative she was trying to create. But what makes this exchange even more frustrating is that it reflects a larger pattern with Ilhan Omar, one that Americans have watched for years. Here is someone who came to the United States as a refugee, was welcomed into this country, received incredible opportunities, built a political career, and rose all the way to the United States Congress. A story that represents the very best of the American dream. Yet, instead of using that platform to unite people, strengthen institutions, and support the nation that gave her those opportunities, she consistently uses her position to attack, criticize, and undermine the United States. You can see it in this hearing, where the focus became attacking an American diplomat instead of addressing the actual crisis in Venezuela. You can see it in countless public statements where she seems more eager to condemn America than defend it, more eager to attack American institutions than strengthen them. This constant rhetoric that downplays extremism, excuses anti-American sentiment, or frames the United States as permanently corrupt and oppressive is deeply troubling coming from a sitting member of Congress. It raises serious concerns about judgment, priorities, and respect for the office she holds. When you watch this exchange, you are not just watching a tense committee hearing, you are watching a perfect example of someone treating Congress like a stage for activism and social media performances instead of a place for serious governance. Elliot Abrams came prepared to discuss complex foreign policy issues, and instead faced hostility, interruptions, and political theatrics. The American people, especially the citizens of Minnesota, deserve leadership that is serious, professional, thoughtful, and respectful of the responsibility that comes with public office. They deserve representatives focused on solving problems instead of creating outrage cycles. And many Americans believe that Ilhan Omar has repeatedly shown she is more interested in division, spectacle, and ideological activism than genuine leadership and statesmanship.